Donating plasma is safe. It is only with the commitment of healthy plasma donors that these therapies are possible. As we've said before, they are not manufactured in a lab. Too few people know that this even exists. They may have heard, of course, that there's a need for blood and blood donation, but not for dedicated plasma donation. So if you're listening, you're thinking, okay, could I do this? Sometimes the patients themselves will go to plasma donation centers to say, thank you. You have no idea what your gift is doing for me. And there are emotional moments that I've seen happen when a donor meets a patient and then they realize they may have a connection that they never thought possible.
Welcome to the Expand podcast, where we unlock the secrets of respiratory health for healthcare professionals. Join leading experts as we dive into chronic lung diseases and expand your practice.
Welcome everyone to this podcast on the alpha-1 antitrypsin. This is part of one new session with Anita Brickman, who is the CEO of the Plasma Protein Therapeutic Association, that we're going to refer here to the PPTA.
Much
Anita,
easier to say.
Thanks. It is. Thank you. Anita, thanks for being with us and giving a chance to the whole audience from abroad and some in Canada, in US and beyond, okay, these two countries to talk about PPTA, okay? Can you give us an overview just to start?
Oh, I would be happy to, and thank you so much for having me. So the Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association, which we do call the PPTA, it's a global healthcare association. And who do we represent? Well, it is the manufacturers of plasma-derived therapies, including those used to treat alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. We also represent plasma donation centers. The key point here is without plasma donors, these essential medicines simply could not be made. And PPTA works to ensure that these therapies are there for people with rare and chronic conditions, including AATD. We help maintain high standards for safety and quality in both plasma collection and the manufacturing process, end to end, in the US and around the entire world. I'm honored to be here today to talk to your community, to spotlight alpha-1 and the critical role plasma donors play in enabling access to augmentation therapy, which is such a lifesaver for so many people with alpha-1.
This is quite important, and for people to understand, where we stand here is different than a drug treatment. Obviously, when you have a drug treatment from the pharma industry, then this is entirely produced from scratch, where a new molecule with very different characteristic will then be brought on the market, will have to be approved by FDA in the state, Canada in Canada, and then go its way, to be on the market. But here it is different. And people have to realize that you have to ensure quality. First of all, you need a donor, because that's coming from blood. And then you have to ensure quality, that whoever in the industry will then give access. In this case, this is plasma protein that we use to replace what is needed in patients that have the alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Tell us more about the main condition and the patient clientele that PPTA will serve.
You raise such an important point about how different these types of therapies are from traditional pharmaceuticals. Plasma, which is the straw-colored liquid in our bloodstreams, contains incredible proteins and antibodies that do so many things in the human body. They help bolster the immune system. They help our blood to clot. They help us to heal. And when certain of these proteins and antibodies are missing, such as in alpha-1, a rare and inherited genetic disorder, when that's missing, that protein can be extracted from the plasma and replace it for the person. In the case of alpha-1, creating an augmentation therapy that can slow the progression of lung disease. It truly is, I think, amazing, the transformation that can happen for people with these plasma-derived therapies. In addition to alpha-1, these medicines are used to treat immune system disorders, immunodeficiencies, meaning a person is born without a really well-working immune system. It can be used to treat bleeding disorders, such as hemophilia, another one called von Willebrand disease. And there are neurological conditions, many of them rare, that respond incredibly well to plasma-derived therapies, including GBS, CIDP. In addition to these rare conditions, which you take them together as a whole, and it's not still quite a lot of patients, in addition to those disorders, plasma is also used, plasma-derived therapies are used throughout medicine, and people may not know when they might need a plasma-derived therapy. They're deployed in shock and trauma, sometimes during open heart surgery, following an organ transplant, and increasingly used to help bolster the immune system while people are undergoing chemotherapy for certain types of cancer. So there are so many impacts to plasma-derived therapies, but what is different, as you said in the beginning, it doesn't start in the lab. It starts with a human donor and goes through a rigorous safety and quality process to get to the end result of a safe and effective plasma-derived therapy that is often either infused through the veins or given subcutaneously through the skin. And the other thing I think that is important to note is these therapies are often required for a lifetime. They replace the proteins and antibodies, but that needs to be done with regular infusions. So they are life-changing, but they are not a one and done. And that's why we at PPTA want to raise awareness about plasma donation and the need for repeat donors to come back time and time again, because they are offering a lifeline to someone else in the world.
That's very important. And people have to realize here that when we're talking of a blood donor, people think about, oh, there's blood needed because there are so many surgery or patient come with a trauma. But people don't realize that there are different parts in that blood and also coming from the plasma that can be used for so many other disease where these protein in the plasma will make the difference for the people life. Okay. And it's kind of so obvious because it's there. People don't, it's available quite okay. We're quite pleased, and we should recognize, okay, that these systems need to be in place, okay, such as your organization PPTA, that is quite important. But how does PPTA work with the different group? Okay, because this start with the patient donor, and then the manufacturer, and then okay the regulatory agency to ensure the availability, and then also the quality and the safety of the plasma therapy. But let's start okay with the plasma donor.
Let me take you, if I may, through the process a little bit. So if someone comes into a dedicated plasma donation center, it will be similar to a blood donation, but it does take longer. Let's start with the donation process. When someone comes into a center, that person will get a rigorous questionnaire, medical screening, an explanation about what they're going to do and where that plasma will go to help someone else in need. The plasma is extracted through a process called plasmapheresis. It is an automated, self-contained, highly sterile process in which the blood is withdrawn, just like in a blood donation setting. The blood is withdrawn, but then the plasma is separated out from the red blood cells and other cellular components that go back to the donor along with rehydration. So actually, because so much of it goes back to the donor, people can donate plasma more often than they can whole blood. So once that plasma is collected, it goes into a very, very cold refrigeration system and then goes through a series of purification, testing, viral deactivation, all these steps along the way in the manufacturing process to ensure the highest quality, potency, and safety of the plasma-derived medicine on the other end. So this is, as you can imagine, a highly, highly regulated industry. Regulated not just on the side of the medicines, but in the plasma donation process as well. So in the United States, it is the Food and Drug Administration that oversees this plasma ecosystem. In Europe, it's the EMA. But every country, as you mentioned, has that regulatory framework that our members need to meet if they're going to have either plasma donation centers or if they're going to produce these medicines and market them or provide them for patients in that country. In addition to meeting those regulatory standards, I'm proud to say that our members also meet PPTA's voluntary standards that go above and beyond regulations to improve the donor experience, to put the utmost emphasis on quality and safety so that the donor feels like they've had an excellent experience in the plasma donation center. There is a highly regulated process through to the medicines, and the patients that get those medicines have confidence in the safety and quality of what they're getting. I'm very proud that we have these additional standards. Our companies go through additional checks or audits in addition to what the regulators may do to audit that plasma donation center or manufacturing facility. So this is a commitment to the donors and the patients.
Hearing you, we kind of feel safe after, because we can see that it is in good hands. There are similarities, like you mentioned, with other countries. Regulation is done, different organization, like in Canada, done through, Blood Canada or EMA
Exactly.
Quebec and Quebec, all. But okay, at the end, these people have to realize this is very important. They have to feel safe to give blood, and they have also to know that they are all on a safety that have been taken. There is no disease that are transmitted. We can think about it, and alpha-1 antitrypsin augmentation therapy is a very good example of that. There hasn't been a case, for example, of HIV transmitted. Okay, and when we're thinking not of thousand, at the end of million of injection giving to 1,000 and 1,000 of patients, this is quite our high standard and a very high security level that people have to feel. Talking of patient donor, what would you like to say for these plasma donor that on this episode, people can have a message that you really want to give them in terms of the patient access and advocacy?
Well, just to take a step back to what you said previously, there has not been a transmission of HIV in decades. Now, unfortunately, in blood products, many, many years ago, that was not the case, and we know some of the devastating consequences that resulted. Coming out of the AIDS epidemic, there was a doubling down on commitment, on quality and safety, to learn from that devastating chapter and to never allow it to happen again. So the donors are screened for HIV, hepatitis, etc. They're also screened for any medicines they might be taking that could be detrimental through the plasma process. And those donors are deferred, meaning they cannot donate. But in addition to that safety step, there are several all along the way when the plasma is tested at first, then after it's pulled together and tested again and again. And there is also steps with heat and other deactivation processes that make sure it is completely safe. And this has continued to evolve over the years where we have not had any transmissions in decades, which is wonderful. So let me go back to what I would like people to take away from this. Donating plasma is safe. It is only with the commitment of healthy plasma donors that these therapies are possible. As we've said before, they are not manufactured in a lab. Too few people know that this even exists. They may have heard, of course, that there's a need for blood and blood donation, but not for dedicated plasma donation. So if you're listening, you're thinking, okay, could I do this? Well, anyone who is 18 years or older, weighs 110 pounds or more, can go to a dedicated plasma donation center. Here in the US, we have more than 1,000 of these plasma donation centers, standalone, separate from the blood banks. And you get a medical screening, as I said, to make sure you're in good health. All your vitals are good. We make sure you haven't been exposed to certain infectious diseases or taking certain medicines. As I said, in those cases, the plasma donor is told they are ineligible to donate. Skilled personnel then walk that person through what to expect in the donation process. For that first visit, it can take a couple hours because it is
Okay.
a process of going through the screening and getting comfortable in the plasmapheresis chair and then going through that donation process. The donor also actually gets saline back in addition to the red blood cells and other components because it immediately helps rehydrate the body. And then just as after a blood donation, you're asked to stay for a little bit to make sure you're not lightheaded or anything like this. This is done time and time again in a very regulated space with dedicated skilled personnel.
How do they find out, Anita, about these center?
So where can people find one of these centers? Well, because there is such a low awareness of plasma donation, we celebrate every fall International Plasma Awareness Week, or IPAW. And we have a special website, plasmaweek.org, that gives people all kinds of information about plasma donation and especially where they can specifically go with the zip code finder here in the United States. As I mentioned, there are more than 1,000 here in the United States. There are also dedicated plasma donation centers in Europe and other parts of the world. And in some cases, you have blood and plasma donation going on together in the public sector. So there are opportunities to donate plasma, and it is so vital. People need to realize that when they sit down in that chair, they are helping someone that they may never meet, but that what they're giving, what they're donating, is truly a lifeline.
Is there a way that some of these, let's say we have people out there which they're be interested, but they'd like to talk to another donor or someone? Do you have in your organization something like people can talk to other people of their experience and from the peer, and not only for the staff of the PPTA?
It's interesting that you asked that because, of course, of privacy concerns, we don't necessarily put people in touch with other donors. But if you visit pptaglobal.org, you will see a wealth of testimonials from donors, as well as on plasmaweek.org. There are testimonials about why people donate, what the experience is like. And I would also invite listeners, if they are considering this, especially here in the United States where there are so many dedicated standalone plasma donation centers, you can find one near your home, walk in, and take a look. Mm-hmm. You can actually just go and see what that experience looks like, see other people in the waiting room, feel free to ask questions, and the staff can also allay any concerns people might have about the plasma donation process. So we are very open and willing to have people come in and see what that process looks like. And it's interesting, we also work so closely with the patient groups, such as the Alpha 1 community, because they are champions of plasma donors. And sometimes the patients themselves will go to plasma donation centers to say, thank you. You have no idea what your gift is doing for me. And there are emotional moments that I've seen happen when a donor meets a patient and then they realize they may have a connection that they never thought possible. For a lot of these conditions, it can take hundreds or thousands of donations for just 1 year of treatment.
Wow.
So this is such a vital need for people around the world, and it's a need that's growing because there is better diagnosis, people are more aware of rare diseases, and the best news of all is that the patients, including in the Alpha 1 community, are living longer, healthier lives. So the need for plasma donation will only continue to increase. But there truly is what we sometimes call a vein-to-vein connection between the donor and the patient.
I like very much the connection you're making, because I do understand, and that's a very good point about the confidentiality of the donor. Mm-hmm. But then making the point that leading that to a group of patients from a given disease, such as alpha-1 antitrypsin, and there are other of these group that benefit from a plasma donation. That's a very good way for a donor also to realize it's really rewarding to know that you're doing something that is going to change a patient life. And listening to these people is probably the best in terms of testimony of the donor, but also testimony of people where their life have been changed because of you and because of the plasma donor. Let's try to look ahead now. And what are the opportunity, but also the challenges that you see in the next 5, 10 years?
Well, I think our biggest one is still a lack of awareness of plasma donation and this delicate supply chain all the way through to the plasma derived therapies and how many people need them. Because of the better diagnosis I mentioned, for example, in immune deficiencies, we anticipate the need for those immunoglobulins goes up about 7% a year around the world. And that is because there are better screenings, diagnostic tests. The patient groups themselves have raised awareness of signs and symptoms of a rare disease that might be missed. So, because of that, people are finding out earlier if they do have one of these conditions, and then they are living longer, which is great. However, they do need these therapies in most cases for a lifetime. So, there is a continuing growing need. So, that is something that is front and center for our organization and our member companies is how do we meet that growing need? Also, as we know, there are health disparities all around this world in a variety of conditions and ailments. And these particular rare disorders are no different. Those people who are living in less developed nations do not have the access that those of us fortunate to be in the US or Canada or other nations like that, the medical care and access that we have. Our mission at PPTA is to try to reach more people, increase patient access, and help them live healthier, longer lives. There is still a tremendous disparity in different parts of the world, and we're trying to address that in every way we can.
That's good. People have to realize that the notion of inequity is present across the world. It is present even within our country. Then even rich countries such as US, Canada, some of the typical European country, then we have to make all effort. And I think your organization is a good example of how can we give access to our population and also beyond, okay, what we can do within our country. It is, I think this has remained a big challenge. The donor remain a big challenge also, where there has to be donor of plasma more and more. As you say, we recognize more disease now that people can benefit from these therapy. If you had one message to say to the public, people listening to us, to understand about the importance of plasma donation and plasma-based therapy, what would it be?
Well, first of all, I think that they should understand that plasma saves lives. This, as I said, is a complicated and delicate supply chain. It takes many, many, many donations to go through this rigorous and highly regulated manufacturing process that can take 9 months to a year from the time of a donation until that therapy is ready to go to the marketplace. So the need is continual, the need is growing. So if this is something that you have considered, if you know someone, if you have a friend or family member in the Alpha-1 community, consider donating plasma. It is a cornerstone of Alpha-1 treatment, the augmentation therapy that we discussed that can keep lung function at its best. For these individuals, it's not a luxury, it's a lifeline. So I would encourage your listeners to visit plasmaweek.org and just find out more about it and find out the many ways that plasma, which is in every one of us, can be turned into a life-saving gift for somebody else. It's pretty amazing.
Just before ending, Anita, then what are people resources that they can obtain information on alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, this condition that lead into a patient with emphysema, and also, okay, the access of the plasma-based therapy?
I would point people to the Alpha-1 Foundation, which is global in its reach, and in Canada specifically, AlphaNet.
Okay.
Tremendous resources and patient advocacy going on, as well as what's new and exciting on the research front, as far as new considerations for living well despite this genetic disorder. And then if you'd like to know more about PPTA, plasma donation, etc., I have two resources. I've already mentioned Plasma Week pptaglobal.org. So that's a little microsite that we have. pptaglobal.org is our organization's website. And there is so much. pptaglobal.org. And it can give you a snapshot of where is plasma collected, where's the manufacturing, what patient groups are treated, and what are some of the issues in the healthcare policy space that can affect access for people with rare disorders. So we try to make that available to everyone. But also, I want to say thank you to you for letting me speak to your listeners, because we reach people one person at a time.
Thank you, Anita. And Respiplus would certainly be willing to receive any comment, people who want to register. Then you'll have access for free to all this information. Thanks, Anita. And I think we should celebrate not only 1 day a year, but we should celebrate all the good work that you are doing. Okay? And thanks to all the plasma donors in US and across the world.
Agreed. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Expand podcast. Stay tuned and listen to other episodes on chroniclungdiseases.com/podcast.